top. Good evening. Welcome. Thanks very much for coming. So this evening I'm going to talk to Chris Riddell, who is the Children's Laureate, a very famous illustrator. A little round of applause for Chris. Thank you. 2 rounds of applause. Good. We haven't really got a plan for what we're going to talk about. You're going to do some drawing, and I'm going to just ask questions while you're drawing, I suppose.
Yes.
Nothing more complicated than that.
No. I think we're just going to make it up as we go along. It's just one of those sort of things I like to do. It's often quite nice just, start off when you... This is my new toy, and I love doing this because I can just gratuitously pick out members of, whatever sort of audience I'm talking to, and sort of draw them. And there's nothing they can do about it. I really do enjoy it.
We could lunge across the table at you, I suppose.
It could all go very Jeremy Kyle, you're right, but it hasn't so far.
So Chris, I'm going to ask a question, seeing as we're going to get going on this. When did you start drawing in earnest? Because I know that I talk to a lot of people, and when they're kids, they'll draw all the time when they're kids. When did you start drawing with any kind of purpose?
Dan, that's a characteristically incisive question. I don't think I ever have.
Oh, okay.
is my answer to that.
So you've been half-assing it the whole way?
I think this idea of drawing with a purpose, I think it's a really interesting one, because I think sometimes the best stuff that we do as illustrators is the stuff where we don't mean it. We're thinking about other things, or something crops up in a sketchbook and we think, where did that come from? And that becomes the basis for building. It's our building block. And so in a slightly facetious way, maybe I've never worked for a purpose, but I've always sort of I've always enjoyed drawing as an activity, and found ways to continue to draw so that I can pay the bills.
Tricking people into paying you for it?
Often it's a confidence trick. My latest ploy is when I meet a nice author, and any of you might try this, actually. If you meet a nice author, I do apologise, I'm continuing to draw. No idea who this is. And they give me their book. I say, do you mind if I do a little sketch in this book? And they usually say, oh, that's fine. They laugh. And then I take it away, and I just, with my charcoal pencil, in the margins, I'll just sort of illustrate it, particularly if it's not been illustrated. I will add the illustrations in the book itself. Often on trains, where people think that I'm some sort of academic making special notes on an essay, until they look over my shoulder and realise I'm drawing on this book, and then I get strange looks. But I tried this with a lovely writer called Sarah Crossan, who did a novel called One, and she gave me her book, and this is a free verse novel. She handed it to me and described it. Free verse novel about conjoined twins. I thought, who can I palm this off on? I smiled as she gave it to me and said, thank you so much. When I started reading it, it was astonishing, absolutely astonishing, as both a novel, as a free verse poem. The thing I loved about it was that it had acres and acres of space. There'd be a page with 2 sentences on it, and then all this white space, very poetic. But the brilliant thing about white space is you can fill it in with a drawing. So I started to draw on this book, and then I got my phone out and just Instagrammed a couple of these things, and then I waited for it was a train journey. I was coming back from Manchester. By the time I got back to Euston, the phone went, and it was the publisher saying, would you like to illustrate Sarah's book? I said, how did you know? They said, we saw some stuff on Instagram. It's possible. You can generate work this way by just sort of graffitiing people's books that you enjoy. That's just a tip.
It's a trick, people.
Yes, it is a trick, yes.
So you're the Children's Laureate?
Yes.
What does that actually mean?
Oh, I did that. That's, again, Dan, this is a penetrating, insightful question.
Let me change my question. What do you actually do?
Yes, that's a good question. Right, let me find the relevant page in my sketchbook. Let's see if we can find an answer to this. There we are. And the Children's Laureate, extremely important. They give you a medal, a real medal on ribbon. It's silver. Lives in a little case on my mantelpiece because I'm terrified of sort of wearing it in public and losing it. Sort of putting it in a pocket and not knowing where it is.
The toilet on a train.
It could be embarrassing. So it lives on the. I do go to it at certain points, Dan, and if I need a little bit of reassurance, I'll just open the case and just stroke the medal. Just it's lovely.
Do you get to keep the medal? Or
You
does it
do
have to be
get to
passed on to the...
No, great. It's actually inscribed with the dates, so it's no good for the next one. So you're 2 years. You spend 2 years as Children's Laureate, and what they ask basically is that you talk about children's books when they occur. You know, the subject crops up in the media. If there are campaigns around literature and children's book issues, they want a sort of figurehead, in a sense, to be able to stand up and talk on behalf of the publishing industry and authors and illustrators, particularly in my case, and talk about the things that we care about. And there are issues such as, at the moment, the reason I'm in Wrexham is that I'm going to be at Wrexham Library tomorrow talking about the importance of school libraries and the provision of good school libraries and with trained librarians in every school, because at the moment prisons have a statutory requirement to have a library, which is a great thing, don't get me wrong, but schools don't. So there's no statutory provision of you know, you can have a library. If you're a well-run school, you can have a librarian, but if you don't want one, if you want an IT suite, no librarian at all, you can do that as well. You know, there's no Ofsted requirement. So I've been talking about that.
Yeah.
And they sort of listen because you have this title.
You got the medal.
That's right. And you've got a medal. I don't show the medal, but you've got that. My very good friend, Heike, she's a printmaker from Germany, and she heard I'd become Children's Laureate. Very sweet. She rushed up to me and said, "Chris, I've just heard you've become Children's Laundrette." And that's sort of because now all my friends call me the Children's Laundrette, so I get no respect at all, Dan. But
so, how do you become the Children's Laureate then? How does that happen?
there is a group of people from the publishing industry, from the Arts Council, from book charities such as Book Trust, Reading Agency. They all get together and they talk. You know, they draw up a short list, and then they ask whether you'd like to be considered for it. So I've been asked, I think, 3 times before, and it just wasn't right at the right stage in my career. You know, I had lots of things to publishing commitments. I didn't want to do it half-heartedly. I didn't want to sort of do a couple of sort of things a year and then disappear for the 2 years.
Is this because it's an awful lot of work?
And a lot of travelling and a lot of turning up at things, and when I wanted to give it my best shot.
Yeah.
So when they asked me this time, I thought, well, they're not going to ask me again, so I better say yes. And it's been the most amazing. It's 18 months in. I've got another 6 months to go. As I say, I'm just getting into the library side of things, which is something I care a lot about. And you're never quite sure where you're going to go next with it. So there are all sorts of things. I can actually, let me show you. Here we are. This is me at the Globe, sitting next to Tom Hiddleston. That was a good moment. Very, very nice young man. We were sort of chatting, as you do. I said, you know, the new James Bond, I think he should be a middle-aged cartoonist. I think that could work really well. You know, they wouldn't see that coming, would they? You know.
I think you can make this work.
So we smart. The best bit, though, Dan, and I say this to children's book people particularly because it warms all our hearts. You know, I was sitting in this it was one of the galleries at the Globe overlooking the stage with Tom, who was reading children's stories out as part of a Radio 2 competition. And so we were sitting shooting the breeze, and then this mother came along with her son, and she said, "Is that you?" And Tom sort of said, "Yes, I'm." She said, "No, is that you? Is that Chris Riddell? You, Chris Riddell?" It was great, you know. And Tom had to sort of do this double take, saying, "Who are you again?" Yeah. I say, "Oh, I do some books," but it was great because she was, you know, mother of one of my readers, you know, and they were thrilled to meet me. You know, it doesn't often happen. And the other thing that was a highlight for me was going on Blue Peter and it lives on my lapel. Not the microphone, the Blue Peter badge.
The gold Blue Peter badge.
Gold Blue Peter badge. It was presented to me. I went on Blue Peter to give a Blue Peter book prize out. They asked me on. I had to do two things. One was walk on and stand at a podium, and the other was to open a gold envelope and read the winner. So I managed to, during rehearsal, I managed to stumble onto the stage and grab the podium, which wobbled like crazy. And then I couldn't open the gold envelope, and then said, okay, just concentrate on not stumbling, lose the envelope. They didn't even trust me to open the envelope, so that went on the, and they shoot this live, so, there was a lot of people going, is he going to do it? I concentrated so hard on not stumbling that I sort of approached the podium in a weird sort of deliberate way, it looked very strange. But I managed to read the card, and that was great. And then the presenter, Lindsay, was dressed, it was World Book Day, so she was dressed as the White Witch from Narnia, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I can't tell you what that did to me, because as a child, I loved Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, but I had a very guilty secret, which was I always identified with Edmund. If a beautiful, cruel sort of witch in furs and a sleigh driven by a dwarf chauffeur came up and invited me to climb in, of course I would, And if she started plying me with Turkish delight, I'd sell the others out. You understand? I was right with Edmund. The whole time I was going, go on, everything. So there she was, as the White Witch. I was having all sorts of flashbacks. And then she said, we hadn't rehearsed this isn't rehearsal. I thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And she handed me this little jewellery box, and I opened it, and there was a gold Blue Peter badge. And my childhood flashed before me, so watching the Blue Peter all those years, I was thinking, wow, really? They're not going to get it back. It lives on this lapel now, and the only problem with this badge is I wear it with pride, and it's great when I go into schools. Only slight problem, I was buying a ticket at Brighton Station the other day, and father and his daughter were there in front of me in the queue, and the daughter turned around and said, is that a gold Blue Peter badge? And I said, yes it is. And she said, why did they give it to you? And I did exactly the thing down of saying, well, I'm this thing called the Children's Laureate. And she was just looking at me going, really? Really? No, I'm not buying any of this.
You stole this badge.
I did. There was a scenario. I didn't want to go into it. I blushed, tremendously. It was an embarrassing moment.
So who are your influences when you're a young artist then?
Many. I think a great influence on me was Raymond Briggs, who was my personal tutor.
Yeah.
I went to Brighton Art School, graduated '84. We live in interesting times right now, don't we? But '84 was an interesting time. We just had the miners' strike. We had a Falklands War. We had we'd had the sort of recession going through. The one thing to be said for the early '80s is that students had, I'd hate to bring this up, we actually had grants. We were paid to go to college. Can you imagine such a thing? We
Can you not tell them this, please?
I'm sorry. This is going to turn into a personal finance lecture. So, in that sense, there was a great, go to art school, why not?
Yeah.
What a brilliant thing to do. I was taught by Raymond Briggs, and Raymond he was working on extraordinary projects that we got to see. And Raymond didn't teach technique particularly. He didn't teach, the finer points of what you were doing. What he was brilliant at is identifying your enthusiasms and saying, directing you towards that. So if you were drawing, I was illustrating Gormenghast, and Raymond just sort of encouraged me, said, go for it, really
lean into it.
I like what you're doing. What he would say, he had this sort of almost way of looking at stuff where he'd say, you'd look at something and say, yes, marvellous, it's marvellous. And you just swell, go, oh. It wasn't necessarily, sort of forensic analysis, but he was an enthusiast. And so I'd leave tutorials with Raymond just feeling as if I could do anything. You know, it was a wonderful sort of sense of let's get out there and try it. And of course I couldn't, and there were all sorts of things I needed to get better at. But that teaching through encouragement is a fantastic thing. Because you sometimes have the other side, the Marine Sergeant side, where this is for your own good, and we need to break you down to build you back up. You know, stop drawing those manga. That's terrible. You know, wizards, no. You know all that. You know, you can be broken down that way. Or you have the hauteur, the sort of conceptual sort of illustration. You know, have you tried that with your eyes shut? Maybe. You know, I think maybe you're actually, the mistake you're making is you're using a pencil instead of describing what you're doing. You know, you can go down that route. I do have a story about that. It's going to take a very long time, so I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, I got some time, I suppose.
Okay. I shouldn't stray into this area. I went to an art school. Now, just looking around Wrexham and your wonderful art school, I've got to say I've seen some fantastic work already, some very exciting work, but I love the situation you've got there, the studio situation. It's reminding me of Cleveland College of Art up in Hartlepool. A lot of people won't know Hartlepool at all. I certainly didn't until they invited me to go up there. It's got a very strong sense of printmaking, which is great for illustration. It's got exactly what you were showing me, the bindery. They make their own books, they make their own fanzines and sort of comics and things. Wonderful stuff. Really top quality. I went up there because they put on a show of lots and lots of different illustrators' work, and I was one, and they asked me up to talk to the students. They also asked a leading London art school. I won't tell you who. Lovely fountains outside the art school. It's lovely. Anyway, it remain nameless. And they came up. It was very interesting. They came up at the same time. They didn't introduce themselves, so I wasn't aware of them at the time. They were lurking, apparently, but I didn't notice them. I was talking to students. We were having a lovely time. I left and got the train back to King's Cross, which was quite close to this anonymous art school that I won't name. And we were travelling back, and suddenly the people across the aisle from me, I recognised from the event I'd done. And I said, were you at this thing? Oh, yes, we're from, and named the art school. I said, oh, right. The exhibition was in a lovely church, a converted church.
Yeah.
And the way of it, it had all these brilliant pieces of work from lots and lots of professional sort of illustrators on the wall, plus the students' work. So it was students and professional illustrators showing together. But in the way of it, sometimes, because it's an art space, you sometimes, you know, the changeover isn't always successful. So you sometimes have some of the old, work from a previous exhibition. It's just left there. They're going to. So I came in and there was a shopping trolley with some sort of fisherman's floats and some newspapers and stuff in one of those sort of found type installation things. Just you had to sort of step past it to get into the gallery space. It was inconvenient, but I'm sure they would move it. Brilliant exhibition. Had a wonderful time looking around. Caught the train home, and there were the tutors. And they identified themselves, and so we had a chat. It was lovely. I showed them my sketchbooks, and that worried them slightly. One of them promptly went to sleep. It was one of those sort of, I'm really gonna concentrate on sleeping. Just leave me out of this, which was interesting. The others seemed to respond. It was quite fun. And I said, well, what were you doing up there? They said, we've been up working with Cleveland College of Art for a week now. So it's one of these sort of inter-college. I thought that was great. It's lovely. I said, well, what were you doing? Well, we were doing a project for the exhibition. I said, and what was it? He said, we worked down on the beach and we created an installation. I said, the shopping trolley with the fisherman's float. Yes, that was. And illustration. Yes. Okay, right. What do we know? I say, those of us who love comics and love graphic novels and love drawing and stuff. What you should be doing is doing installations of shopping trolleys. You know, take it from me. That's where you know.
You're getting this wrong.
Yeah, I know. I hate to sort of break this to you. You know those beautiful books you've been
Shove
making.
this into the bin.
Can you be a little more conceptual about
I'm
this?
going to try.
Thank you.
I'm going to try. Well, on that note, Chris, where do you get your ideas from?
Right. You told me this might crop
did,
up.
yeah.
Here's my sort of show and tell. My ideas come from here. Sketchbooks. And I often say to students, you know, and you must be told this all the time, sort of keep a sketchbook. But my take on it isn't quite that. I think what I would say is keep a secret sketchbook or keep a personal sketchbook. Keep a sketchbook you don't show tutors. I'm sorry, Dan, but you know,
I'll allow it.
Your own space, and draw all the time. You know, make yourself draw, even when you don't feel like drawing, when you don't feel inspired. Sometimes that's the best time to actually draw, is when you're just thinking, you know, I've got a terrible hangover, I don't want to do it, I want to watch some terrible TV. Get your sketchbook out and watch that terrible TV, nurse your hangover, but draw. But draw anything you like. If you spend a year drawing unicorns, don't beat yourself up about it, just go with it. If you have a personal sketchbook that is just for you and is just full of anything you want, you know, don't even sort of, or automatic drawings is what I'm talking about. It's a great analytical tool. You can then go back to it and you can start to look at it and say, okay, maybe this is a direction I might go in. So for me, I spend a lot of my time, this is not a good example because this is a little show I'm going to be doing in London where I'm going to live draw to Under Milkwood. That was my attempt at a little thumbnail poster. But a lot of the time, I just draw. Yes, I mean, it's a terrible pun. So when I'm sitting on a train or something, I'll start drawing, and something like this will start with you know, doing a bit of, you know, sort of foliage, just because it's a nice, calming thing to do. And then after a while, it can turn into something, I don't know, I just wanted to sort of turn it into something else. So it became a little funny, surreal sort of drawing of someone's hairstyle. I don't start with this in mind. I just see where it goes, because it's for me. It's not for anyone else. No one's going to commission this. It doesn't matter. I had a little watercolor set I wanted to try out, so I thought, okay, let's do a little sort of fairy tale type thing. I say anyone can actually sort of look through my sketchbook as long as they're not a trained psychiatrist, because I don't want this analysed. You know, this is sort of, you know, for me, this man has issues, deep issues. But sometimes drawing things just because the image makes you feel nice. You know, drawing comforting things, you know, can be almost a therapeutic thing. And it can sort of, you know, just, you know, an embrace or something can become a sort of, can provide sort of solace of some sort. It's also quite fun drawing people who, when they don't know you're drawing them, you know, on trains. Our great mobile phone culture is fantastic for inadvertent drawing. And then, obviously that's not someone on a train. But what happens then is you start, you know, out of this can come scenarios, things that you, if you were trying to do, you possibly wouldn't do in quite that way. You know, so this started with a sort of figure, and then I thought, oh, I remembered the elves and the shoemaker, and I liked that idea. And then I thought, and I often quite enjoy doing this, just as a technique, take something that normally would be told in a certain way and feminize it, because I think that changes the approach. So I quite enjoy sort of doing sort of famous characters from fiction, you know, Olivia Twist. That would be an interesting story, you know, just trying to sort of turn things round a bit. Hunting of the Snark, actually, the baker in the Hunting of the Snark being actually a woman in disguise. It changes that story a lot. I thought the elves and the shoemaker could be Vivienne Westwood types. You know, this could be a whole sort of, you know, different way to go. I won't even go there. That's something completely different. But you know, we could come back to it. Yeah, another comfort drawing in a way. So quiet, solitude, story starter. You know, but just fun to draw. It might lead somewhere. I'm really interested, Dan, when you were showing me your sort of 24-hour comics.
Yeah.
You know, the speed of that means that you don't have time to sit and
You don't have to
overanalyze.
second guess anything, do
Yeah.
you? You have
Yeah.
to just get it done. I quite like that.
And I think out of that comes creativity. So I think, you know, sketchbooks are places where, you know, you don't have to try too hard. You know, really, it can be anything you want. These are comfort places for you as illustrators, I would say, or all of us as illustrators, to draw what on earth we like. But they can also turn into tools. So I was going up to a library demonstration up at the British Library, and I thought, well, it'd be fun to actually draw a few poster-type images that I could just take on my phone and post up so that the people at the demonstration who follow me on social media will see that I'm coming along and I'm doing some stuff. So I just drew. I think this is my sort of ideal librarian. I don't know who she reminds me of, Sarah Denant, I think. But anyway, there she is. But you can just sort of posterize things just in a sketchbook. It doesn't have to go any further than that. But they can have a life of their own. Another little sort of poster-type image. And I've seen quite a few of you working digitally, and I think that is the great breakthrough that we have now. When I started, you know, we just didn't have this sort of technology. Now you can take inadvertent work, something that just occurs in a sketchbook, you can take it out, you can scan it, you can start to use that as the building block of what you do, and I think that's incredibly exciting. I love sort of drawn work that then starts to be treated digitally and goes somewhere else. I can't do that at the moment. I need training. I might be enrolling next year, but here we go. Fee, fi, fo, fum. Let's save libraries for everyone. Okay. Austerity. I like a good label. Someone sent me a tweet a while back. They said, you're a political cartoonist. I bet you label everything. I bet your chair says chair and your fridge says fridge. I said, yes, I am a political cartoonist. I do like to label things, but I think you'll find my fridge is labelled conspicuous consumption. I thought it was a good reply. I got it in the number of characters. Yeah.
So what's the difference? Because you talk about yourself as a cartoonist. So what's the difference between a cartoonist and an illustrator then?
It's simply a description, I think, Dan. I think that you can be both, you can be either, you can be one in one context and you can be something else in another context. In a sense, a lot of what we're talking about now is about finding context. Yeah. You can find context through your sketchbook, you know, by finding out, you know, enthusiasms, what you like drawing. I think fan art is amazing. It's often sort of slightly over, cycling fish, don't know why, can often be sort of slightly decried, but I think fan art's a great response. You read something that moves you, you're excited by, you do a drawing. What a fantastic thing to do. It starts something, doesn't it? Yeah. This was a little series of events I do when I use my document camera. It's called Ask the Laureate, and it's a number of events I've done at festivals where people fill out postcards ahead of time, and then I sit at one of these things and they hand me the postcards. I shuffle them and then just answer them as I go. And it's usually quite fun, but you do occasionally get an awkward one. So
No, really?
I was in Brighton, I turned the postcard over, it said, if you could get any piercing, what piercing would you get? And I sort of think, oh my goodness. And the best I could come up was piercing blue eyes. Let's not go Victorian on this. Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
Old goblin.
So what are you actually drawing with then?
I'm drawing with one of these, a very sharp Conte pastel pencil. It's got a sort of certain smoky line to it, which I like. It can be quite dark and definite. It's quite nice, actually. I mean, what I'm doing a lot of now is almost dispensing with underdrawing, so what I tend to do is go with my first draft. It's quicker that way, but you're tightrope walking to a certain extent, you know. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. No. But, you know, when I'm working, you know, in ink, what I'll do is a pencil underdrawing, and then I'll take a paintbrush and draw over the top of that, and then lay watercolour over the top of that. But sometimes it can be fun to go with one's first thing and just sort of. When you said it's like tightrope walking, how do you mean? Describe that. I think you've got to go with your compositional decisions straight off. Actually, working in a sketchbook is quite useful because sometimes, you know, the borders of the sketchbook, you can play with that compositional restriction. You can sort of suggest by, you know, close up that there's more in the scene that you might not see, or you can sort of, who knows, or you can pull back a bit and make it more landscapey, but you're always sort of dealing with how things work within. And I like some of the sort of discoveries you make as you just go with direct compositions. When I'm designing books, what I like to do is actually sort of thumbnail the sort of entire book out at about this scale.
So literally thumbnail scale.
Absolutely that scale, and then sort of with. And this is what I do when I'm writing a children's book. I've just been writing early chapter books, and the last book I wrote, what I did was before I wrote anything, I just thumbnailed what I wanted the book to look like. So, you know, how that indicates words, that indicates an illustration. And then I just sort of quite, you know, just thought, well, I know this is going to be about a purple fox that lives in a sort of dustbin behind an apartment block. It's going to go on an urban safari. It's going to meet all sorts of people. So I just drew this in miniature. And then when I came to the extent of the book, which was 171 pages, with double-page spreads and integrated chapters, broken down into 10 chapters. And then when I came to write it, I just wrote what I imagined would be the word count per page based on these thumbnails. But the next stage was to actually take these little thumbnails and blow them up to the actual size of the book, so that the sort of compositional decisions I was making this small, when you suddenly then blow it up, look really dramatic. They're the sort of decisions you wouldn't necessarily make if you were doing finished roughs in that way. So it's quite a nice way in to designing a book. It's something I think that in comics happens a lot.
Yeah.
You know, you actually start with the whole visual sort of rhythm of the book before the words maybe.
Yeah, when I'm doing a book, it's literally that.
Yeah.
And then blowing it up and working with a light box from those thumbnails.
Only trouble with this approach, Dan, is when I finish doing the thumbnails, I feel as if I've done the book.
Yeah, you get that
I feel that sense of completion, and then I go, oh no, I've actually got to do it. You know, I thought that was done. Now I've got to sit down. This is hours and
You're
hours.
just got to
of work.
manage everyone's expectations that this is what good books look like.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, mini books. I like this. Yes.
So, what was your big break then? Do you remember the job that sort of launched your career?
Yes, I do. I've got two big break stories.
Okay.
Possibly three.
Okay.
We've
got time.
There you go. Thank you, Dan. My first big break story was I didn't go for a cup of tea in the canteen. Raymond Briggs was being headhunted by a publisher called Sebastian Walker, who set up Walker Books. And Sebastian was a lovely man. Very flamboyant, turned the children's book industry upside down in the early 80s, you know, sort of by paying illustrators and authors a lot of money in advance, you know, a lot of money. You know, people were shocked in publishing. You mean? He's not paying in guineas? What's going on? So he was really sort of, you know, quite a character, and he'd set up Walker Books. He was very sort of successful, and he wanted Raymond Briggs to work for him. Raymond was at Penguin, and he got in touch with Raymond, and Raymond did what all good tutors do, Dan, and you do this as well. He thought, okay, I'll have a bit of leverage. They want me to work for them. I don't want to work for them, obviously, but I'm going to get them to come down to the art school and meet the art students. You know, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I won't tell you what Dan, forced me to do, but he knows where the bodies are buried, so I had to come and talk to you today. But Sebastian sort of came down with his designer and his editor, and the idea was they were going to sort of butter Raymond up. Instead, Raymond was determined that they should meet students, and he'd introduce them to students. The only trouble was, unlike your sort of studios, in Brighton, our studios were really empty, because people would go back, you know, once the crit had been given out and you had the project, they'd disappear, sort of, you know, off to digs or off to wherever. I was in really crummy digs, so I loved being in the studio. You know, it was warmer, I had my space, and it was great, and it wasn't too crowded, it was great. So it was really weird that a lot of people didn't work in art school. I did, 4 friends of mine did, a little group of us, we all sort of shared a studio. They went up to get a cup of tea. I stayed down, I was working on a fairy tale, I think, illustration. Raymond came in expecting to see a nice hubbub of students, just as I've experienced this afternoon. And there was no one there. It was just me. I was the only student in this entire sort of studio. And so, of course, Raymond sort of, you know, fell upon me and said, "Chris, show Sebastian what you're doing." I was much better looking back then. You know, I was young, I was sort of fashionable. I think Sebastian was rather taken with me. I do remember him just gently sort of brushing my fringe out of it. You know, I wasn't proud. I used my wiles. He wanted to impress Raymond, so he said, asked me what I was working on, and I showed him this fairy tale illustration. He said, we're doing a series of books for Sainsbury's. And, you know, at the time, everyone said, Sainsbury's, it's a supermarket. You don't sell books in a supermarket. Are you mad? But Sebastian, no, he was groundbreaking. He was going to sell a series of books in Sainsbury's. And he said, would you like to do a book of fairy tales for Sainsbury's? I said, yes, please. Batted my eyelids. And so he commissioned me on the spot, I think, to impress Raymond. Now, if anyone else had been there, they would have been commissioned. I'm under no sort of doubt about that. And so that was my first job. Just because I was there at the right time. Someone came in to art school and they commissioned me. Who knows? I mean, I think maybe I would have probably worked in children's books because of Raymond and his influence anyway. But this was a wonderful sort of fast track. So my first book was published just as I graduated.
Which is pretty good.
It was great. But then the other thing, Dan, which again is a sort of slightly different sort of first break story, which was when you get your first book published, you then contractually you can get another. You wait to be commissioned for the next one. You look around you, and so I was sort of looking around. I was seeing people showing my work, and I went into a publisher's and was showing this publisher my work. And he said, he's a chap called Klaus Pfluger at Anderson Press, and Klaus sort of looked at what I was doing. And Klaus is sort of quite sort of Germanic and to the point and doesn't sort of, beat around the bush. And he just looked at my work. He said, "Yes, it's fine. I can see you can draw." I said, "Oh, thanks." And then he said to me, But where are your stories? Have you got any stories?" And no one had actually asked me that before. Which these days seems ridiculous. But back then, in a sense, we were illustrators. We were working to be commissioned. Fairy tales, do a fairy tale book. If someone needs an illustrator, then there we were. Klaus said, "Where are your stories?" And I slightly, I suppose, thought, I'm going to look a real idiot if I don't have a good response to this. So I said, "Of course, I've got some stories. I've been working on some stories." He said, "Excellent. Bring me a story in tomorrow. Bring me one of these stories you're working on tomorrow." I said, "Yes, okay." And I sort of left, and I thought, this is a definite in, but I've never written a story. I'm an illustrator. I don't write. But I think, actually, even back then, an important part of that was, well, why not? Why not sort of create something? Writers are writers. They love that sort of stuff. I'm an illustrator. I love visual things. Why can't I tell a visual story? Why can't I? So I sat down, and that's what I tried to do. And that evening, I sort of cobbled something together. It was a little story of a sort of figure that lives under a boy's bed who sort of comes out. He was big and blue and furry. This was before Monsters, Inc., I've got to say. This is, I haven't pursued litigation. But anyway, there's this big, cute character. He's called Mr. Underbed, I called him. And the idea was to sort of, that whatever is under your bed is cute and reassuring. So don't be sort of frightened by it. And I did this little story and took it in. And Klaus looked at it and he said, "Yes, this is perfectly fine. We'll publish it." And I thought, right, okay, so that's what I should be doing. I should be thinking about stories and thinking about... It's something that I think any cartoonist who self-publishes and produces their own comics is doing all the time.
Well,
it was
I
a
remember
revelation
thinking,
for me. Yeah.
well, realising that you don't really have to wait for anyone's permission to do anything.
Exactly, yes.
That's quite liberating. I can just do this now.
You can do it in your own way because you want to do it and you want to be creative. And when you leave sort of art school, it's incredibly important to continue, producing work in the way that you are doing at college. No one is going to be on your back. No one's going to be chasing you up for this stuff. You've got to do it. But part of that is maybe finding imperatives, putting yourself into situations where, you've got 24 hours to do something, or you've got to turn up with something, or even just go away and collaborate with friends on things, My daughter Katie's just graduated. She's working with a friend of hers who graduated in creative writing. Katie was at Manchester. Her friend India's graduated from Brighton. She wants to be a writer. Katie wants to be an illustrator. They're working together on a project. Now, it's just, it'll be something. I don't know what, but they're taking something forward. And I say to many students I meet, this is the best practice. Carry on doing what you're doing and define yourself. If you're an illustrator and you say you're an illustrator or a cartoonist, that's who you are. The minute you leave college and you do what you do, you're an illustrator, you're a cartoonist. And that's a great thing. It's a great thing to do. It's often not hugely rewarding at times. There are lots of issues around it. But as long as you keep doing it, that's who you are. And I think that's... I'm getting very serious. And I like the way you coaxed me into these deeper sort of areas.
Into it.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'm always interested
that's Hel, by the way. Hel, the sort of Norse ruler of the underworld. She's Loki's daughter, born from some sort of torrid affair with sort of Nordic giantess. My very good friend Neil Gaiman has just written a book of Norse mythology with all these crazy, crazy things on it. So what I like to do is, when he does something like this, there are no illustrations to it, so I've just been illustrating it in my sketchbook and then posting it up. And then the army of Neil Gaiman sort of fans pick it up and then sort of like the things I'm doing in enormous numbers. It's a cry for help.
So
from me.
Is this the thing that's changed the most then in the time that you've been doing this? The ability to immediately connect with 100,000 people?
Absolutely. Right, okay. Let me turn to the sketchbook, Dan. By way of illustration. Now this is a little story I like to tell. This was my introduction to social media. I was invited to go to the bookseller conference earlier this year, and I was assured that just as we're doing now, Dan, I would sit down on a chair and the lovely editor of the bookseller would have a conversation with me. So I didn't have to prepare anything. We'd just be talking as we're doing now, Dan. It was great. Until I arrived, they said, you've got 20 minutes. You're following the speaker on virtual reality. 20 minutes, don't run over. You're the last speaker. You've got a visual. We set up the visualizer, but there's no time to test it. You're just going to have to go with it. I said, but isn't anyone going to ask me? They said, no, we've changed the format. I was going, and I had 5 minutes outside the hall. It was a big auditorium, a huge, great place. I had sort of 5 minutes. I thought, I'm going to have to do something. So this is, I got my sketchbook out and I just drew a couple of little sort of visual notes. So I thought, okay, right, at least I can turn the pages. So this is what I came up with. My wife washed my jeans. I didn't actually ask her to. I left them, sort of carefully, sort of
on the floor,
laying on the floor, as you do, my wife, being a wonderful, wonderful woman, washed them, And then she came into the studio and said, I thought the washing machine was broken. And I go, no. And she said, no, it's okay. It was making this weird clunking sound. So I turned it off and I took your jeans out. And she said, why don't you check your pockets? And I said, but I didn't ask you to wash my jeans. And, there's one of those kind of conversations. But in the end, she said, I checked your pockets. You'd left your mobile phone in your pocket. So I said, you've washed my mobile phone. She said, yes, I'm afraid so. I tried it. It was dead. It was nothing. So I phoned up my mobile phone provider, and they sent me, almost by return of post, because I must have the worst phone sort of deal in the world. They sent me the brand new iPhone immediately, because they were amazed I hadn't had an upgrade for 5 years or something. I just didn't know any better. So it arrived, this smartphone arrived. And as luck would have it, Macmillan, my publishers, had been in touch with me and said, why don't you do any social media? And I said, because look at me, it's not for me, I don't do Facebook, that's for, other people and all this other stuff. They said, come in and just talk to us about it, and we'll see whether you might find a way that might be useful. And I said, oh, okay. So I went in and I had my smartphone, didn't know how to use it, but I had my smartphone. And I had an afternoon at Macmillan where they just showed me very gently, Facebook, how to use Facebook, this is what you could do. I was going, really? Showed me Instagram. No idea what Instagram was, but they were gentle. And then Tumblr. We were really going out. So okay, right. Twitter, a little bit of Twitter, and I'm deeply sceptical about all this stuff. And then they introduced me to, I like to call her the girl with the dragon tattoo. I don't know whether she's got a tattoo. Just want to say that down, but incredibly beautiful, very young and media savvy. She's called Maya. And she works in Macmillan, sort of like tech sort of thing. I gave her my phone. She put all these things, she set up all these accounts for me, all the accounts, and all linked. So all I had to do is like take my camera out, my phone out, take a photograph, and then it would be posted up to all these sites. I think, I don't know, to this day I don't know how she does it, but anyway, that's what she did. And then they sent me home, I thought, great. So I took my sort of phone out the next day. I thought it would be rude not to do something. It would be, because they took the time to sort of educate me, and I thought it was rubbish. But anyway, so I just thought I'd do a little test, and I took my phone out, and I just found, I don't know, just a complete sort of random sort of picture. I don't know, just found a little picture. Took a photograph of it, and then it was posted on sort of Facebook and Tumblr and Instagram, And I sort of forgot about it until maybe the next day. And I thought, I'll just go and I'll just have a look, on my phone. And I'm really bad at this. I'm really useless with my phone. But I managed to get Facebook up, and I just looked at it. And someone, this is my moment. This is my sort of Damascene moment. Someone somewhere in the world, who I'll never get to meet, I'll never know who it was, sent me a blue thumb, And I got this, like, really warm, fuzzy feeling. So, oh, that's nice. It's nice. Don't know who they are. Never meet them, but oh, yeah. So of course I went back and did another one, and another one, and within a week I couldn't stop. I became completely sort of obsessed with checking my social media accounts. Facebook. Let's see what happened. I've done that ever since, and that was sort of 3.5 years ago. I could boast about my Tumblr followers, if you want to. I mean, far be it from me. I think I'm up to 18,000.
Pretty good.
Thank you. I could boast about my Instagram followers. I won't. I'm up to 50,000.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Thank you. I'd like to say that. Most people I mix with don't know what the hell that is and just give me a pitying look. It's good. Anyway, But what can happen then is what I found is that it can also do really interesting things. So it's not just posting up sort of a sketch or whatever. That's nice. But on Instagram and on Facebook, it's something like this. This is a little piece that's buried at the back, not intentionally, but was in a little sidebar in the back of the Guardian education supplement. And it's about Finland, and it says, in Finland, children don't start formal academic learning until 7. They're okay with that. They like that. Finland outlaws school selection, formal examinations until the age of 18. No SATs, none of that stuff. Also, no streaming by ability. Forget all that stuff. They're Finnish. They don't know any better. Competition, choice, privatisation and league tables do not exist. It's a very backward country, obviously. Finland devolves more power to teachers and pupils. Dangerous. National curriculum changes were introduced this year. These now devote more time to arts and crafts. I mean, please. The National Board of Education in Finland says that at the heart of the new curriculum is the joy of learning. Yeah, ridiculous. They have nothing better to do. I posted this up on Facebook, and I have the Facebook they set up for me is just it's not a personal Facebook. It's a sort of whatever the other one is, a public one, and it tells you your post reach. I think it says now this got a post reach of over 2 million. astonishing, isn't it? And it's from a little thing I just scribbled down in my sketchbook and posted up because the words are great, because it's a lovely thing. And so, now when I find good words and words I sort of like, I'll just sort of post something up. This got sort of, a good sort of 200,000, I think, and it has become a sort of engine of actually sort of putting out sort of all sorts of things, and you find now I sort of do this thing where I as sort of I draw myself again therapeutically. This was a little thing I did as Laureate, which was sort of why isn't radio illustrated more? I don't know why, honestly, because you now have sort of webcams and Instagram and live streaming and periscoping and stuff. So I met Lauren Laverne, the DJ, at an event at the British Library, and we were talking about this. And I said, what I'd love to do is just listen to your show one day, back in my studio, and just live stream, my drawings to each of your tracks. I'll just see whatever the tracks are. And she sort of said, no, come in to the studio and do it. And I said, well, yeah, okay. I was just going to offer to do it at home, but she said no. And I went in and I set up my phone and just sort of drew while she played, for an hour or so, just whatever the playlist. I didn't know what she was going to play, but so I just sort of, sat there. And they live streamed it as well, and they had a Twitter feed and stuff. They got very excited because lots of people tuned in, because lots of people who listen to Lauren Laverne are artists and illustrators working in their studios at home, just as I did, So there was a lovely sort of sense of community, and we're all doing the same thing. Really good fun as well. And that's the sort of thing, in a sense, you can't plan necessarily too much, but you've just got to be open to it. I think open to different ways you can put your work out there. In some form. And what I do now is I try to, every day of my time as Laureate, this is volume 6, so there are another sort of 5 of these, but I just do a little sort of drawing and post it up for whatever I'm doing each day as part of the Laureate thing, and then I'm going to sort of publish this for next year. Sort of in aid of charity. So it's going to be a sort of book charity thing. Amnesty, I think, will benefit. Just for anyone who's interested, and I'll put other pieces of work in there with it as a day, but it's just a daily record of the things. Here I'm using my document camera. Sort of, and sometimes they're not even about anything. That's just me at home not doing very much, so I sort of pretend I'm doing some really interesting work, It's a great way of sort of people going, oh, yes, you've been very busy. Oh, yes, I have, honestly, doing a lot of drawing, yes. So it's a wonderful medium, I think, for sort of, sort of reaching people, I think. And I think the sort of notion of, as future illustrators and cartoonists, the whole world of the sort of self-publishing in a sort of social media context is a really good one. It's an exciting one, and it's a way in which you can get your work seen by people and get it out there. And it's a click away. And this I think is what we're all learning. There are going to be new ways, I think, to sort of publish our work.
Excellent. Do we have any questions from the audience at all? We're going to run out of time. We've probably got enough time for 1 or 2 questions. Any burning desires to know anything?
There's a stunned silence that descended. What on earth could we possibly add to that? That's wonderful. Oh, okay.
All the way up. You get over drawing block, if you will?
There's no such thing. There is no such thing as drawing block. Look, I've got over my drawing block. Look, uncanny. I know that sounds sort of silly, but actually, I think that if you don't feel like drawing, do a drawing about not feeling like drawing. If you just can't be bothered to do something, draw yourself with a caption saying, I can't be bothered to do anything. You'll suddenly start to find, the ideas are being generated, things are happening. Now, there might not be great ideas, I mean, I have some of the most amazing, deep, almost transcendent ideas and moments, often late at night in my studio, by candlelight, dressed in a capacious linen chemise, an image. And, you know, I create a thing of such indelible beauty. I think, oh, how did that happen? And then the next day I'll come into the studio and I'll go, what was that? What's going on there? 3-breasted mermaids riding space chameleons. No. And I don't throw it away. I don't sort of get rid of it. I don't sort of tear it out of my sketch or however it exists. I have in my studio a plan chest full of pieces of artwork, and you know, which I store. The very bottom drawer is what I call the naughty drawer, and I open the naughty drawer and I put these things into the naughty drawer, and then I close it. That's where all those ideas live. You know, all those ideas that really shouldn't see the light of day. And then just occasionally I'll open the naughty drawer and have a look, and I'll think, okay, the 3 breasts was a mistake, but space chameleons, yeah, that could work, you know. And then you sort of go, right, okay, and then it comes back to you. So I think, in a sense, what I'm saying is almost embrace the block. You know, actually go, you know, what the hell? I can hold a pencil. I can do something. I'm going to do it. It might not be great, and then I'll put it away, but I could revisit it. But it's so much about, and I think so much creativity is about momentum. It's about the tyranny of the blank page. It's about that sort of, oh, God, I've got nothing. And what you're going to do is say, okay, I've got nothing. I'm going to celebrate the fact I've got nothing. This is going to be all about really, really vacuous thoughts. That could be a thing. And on you go. And then it deepens. And after a while, I think you find your voice. You find what you're good at and what you should avoid. I learnt the hard way that really my forte was not manga cockroaches to illustrate Japanese language teaching books. I learnt the hard way. I had to draw that manga cockroach about 9,000 times across a series of 8 books that were once very big in Japan. Goodness knows why. It was a living, but you know, you will find your place and what you want to do, but you only find that by doing it. It's not suddenly going to happen. You just got to carry on, you know, get through the bad ideas, get through the blocks, but fill up sketchbooks.
Good. Well, can you join me in thanking Chris for coming in and talking to us all? Thanks very much, Chris. And we're done. So we can swear again now.
Excellent.
Okay.